Congratulations, you've made it through the class. From here on, we're just going to do some review and stuff that will help you prepare for the final project. But you should feel proud of what you can do. Know how to predict a variable based on several different types of variables. This is multi-dimensional regression. We can handle categorical effects with interactions. We can handle numerical interactions, lots of different values, and even log transformations. There's a lot you can do. I hope you feel like this class has been helpful. If it has, you might want to consider where this class is designed to take you next. The goal is a whole bunch of people who are in intro stats, and maybe some of you learned a lot and maybe some of you not so much, but let's all get you up to a level and get you into some more complicated types of models, and then you're ready to handle a whole bunch of different types of classes. The most important, and that's why I've written it in red, would be the regression class. We call that our bread and butter class. It is extremely valuable for anyone who wants to go on to grad school or do research, or anyone who wants to be a scientist. Now the good news is this class covers probably more than half of the concepts that are done in regression. What do you get in regression? Well, let's be a little more clear about our notation. Let's make sure that we've got the null and alternative hypothesis. Every time we're looking at a p-value, there was a null and alternative somewhere behind that. And we've been a little fuzzy on what those are because we're emphasizing how to use those p-values. But what if we wanted to test multiple sets of betas instead of a p-value for each beta? Well, there's a way to do that as long as you know how to set up the null and the alternative. We talked a little bit about best subsets. This class did backwards regression, and we also used R-squared adjusted, but AIC and BIC are other common things you might talk about. Logistic regression says, what do I do if my response isn't numerical, it's categorical? And a lot of the rules change, but some rules stay the same, and logistics is very valuable. And then how do we handle things like non-normal errors? Some details. Let's look at the math, get used to those equations. What's really going on here? So this will take everything we have done and make it even more powerful for you. This class is sometimes called a baby regression class. It's designed to prepare you for this. And if you get some good regression, you're going to look really good to grad schools. We hear a lot of grad schools say things like, it's easy to take a statistician and teach them what we need them to know for our school, psychology, ecology, whatever. But it's hard to take someone who's gone really far in business or accounting and teach them the statistics. So this is going to be good if you're going into a competitive field. Here's the good news. If you pick up this methods class and the regression class, pick two more, you've got a minor. Psychologists, for example, will often pick design of experiments and probably categorical. Meanwhile, the economists or finance majors tend to like time series and multivariate. Perhaps if you're marketing, you would lean towards sampling and categorical, or business majors might want design of experiments and multivariate. Lots of options. Engineers probably design and multivariate. I have a lot of students come in and sit down and say, here's where I want to go with my career and here are my future goals, and we can talk about which two classes would probably work well for you, and that's a minor, which is very impressive to get a stats minor. And who knows, you might actually like it. If you want a major, you would pick one of these not to take. You'd have to pick up 2 theory courses, make sure you take the calculus classes and do a thesis. That's what a stat major is. So let's talk about these classes. Design of experiments, you're often facing a problem if you've only got 10 bombs you can experiment with, but you've got a whole lot of different things you want to measure. Should you do all 10 spaced out equally away from the target, or should you do half of them close to the target, half of them far away? Well, it changes the error structure. And the answer to that question depends on what it is you're trying to answer with your research. So design of experiments is a fun class. Categorical says, how do the rules change if this isn't a numerical response? And we talked about logistic regression, which is something also talked about in categorical, as well as odds and risk, and how do you measure the error structure? How do you see whether you've got the model right? Those are all categorical effects. Multivariate looks at lots of different kinds of error structures and how they can combine. And one of the error structures that's talked about is time series, but not in the same amount of depth. Time series goes through a lot of detail about happens when one of your data points goes high. Do we expect future data points to also be high, or are they going to compensate by being lower? Those are the kind of things time series will go through. Multivariate touches on some of those ideas, along with a lot of other types of complex structures, including some that even deal with categorical effects. So this is a very broad-based class, whereas this is more in-depth. And then we have sampling. These are probably terms you heard in the intro class, cluster, stratified, but they didn't tell you why they matter. Sometimes, depending on what question you're asking, they'll affect what your sample size really is or how that error structure changes. So sampling goes through those types of changes. Each one of these builds your toolkit as to the types of questions in science that you can ask and how they are answered. Statistics is a very valuable degree for anyone who wants to do, follow, or create science in the modern world. And I'll admit shamelessly that in this class, we recruit pretty heavily for stat majors because you've seen the ideas of the kinds of questions statistics can tackle, why it's complicated, why people are willing to pay you to do this, and ideas on where it could go from here. So if you're interested, you can either come talk to me. I think I'm going to encourage you to pick up the regression class, and we'll talk about what other classes might do well for you. And if you're saying, I don't want to think about that right now because you're stressed about the final project, that's okay. In the next video, let's talk about what that final project asks you to do.